The sharp rip of packing tape echoed as my mother-in-law supervised the erasure of my existence. My husband stood silent, unwilling to meet my eyes. Under my oversized coat, my hand guarded the secret growing inside me. They thought kicking me out was the end. They did not know I had kept the one receipt that would burn their $18 million fantasy to the ground. My name is Mara Collins, and at 34 years old, I stood in the hallway of the only home I had ever truly loved, watching it be dismantled piece by piece. The sound was the most painful part. It was a rhythmic, tearing noise. Scritch. Rip. My mother-in-law, Darla Sloan, was sealing cardboard boxes with the efficiency of a woman clearing out a foreclosure, not her son's marital home. She pointed a manicured finger at the bookshelf, her voice sharp and commanding. "Pack those away. We need this space clear for the staging crew tomorrow." Darla barked at the movers she had hired without asking me. Standing a few feet away was Evan, my husband. He leaned against the kitchen island with his arms crossed over his chest, staring intently at the floorboards as if they held the secrets of the universe. He refused to look at me. He stood there like a stranger, a statue carved from ice. I shifted my weight, and my oversized wool coat fell open just enough to reveal the plastic edge of a hospital bracelet on my wrist. My hand moved instinctively to cover it, resting against my flat stomach. I had rushed home from the clinic just an hour ago, breathless and terrified but happy, carrying news that should have changed everything. I was pregnant. After 7 years of negative tests and heartbreak, there was finally a heartbeat, but I never got the chance to say the words. Darla walked past me, snatching my ceramic coffee mug off the entry table. It was still warm. "I called a taxi for you." "Mara." "One way," she said, looking at the mug with disdain before setting it down on a stack of books destined for charity. "And please, leave the silver photo frame. That is a family heirloom." It was not an heirloom. I had bought it at a discount store with my own freelance money 3 years ago because Darla had complained the foyer looked bare. But I did not have the strength to fight her for a $20 frame. Kendra, Evan's sister, was lounging on the sofa, scrolling through her phone with a bored expression. She looked up, her eyes glinting with a malicious sort of glee. "Don't worry about the small stuff, Mara," Kendra said, offering a tight, artificial smile. "We can afford real antiques now, things with actual history." The word now hung in the air like a blade. It had only been 3 weeks since the lottery numbers flashed on the television screen. $18 million. That was the price tag they had put on my marriage. I looked at the kitchen island again. There was a thick manila envelope sitting near Evan's elbow. The new separation agreement. They had drafted it, printed it, and placed it there before I even walked through the door. The ambush was total. "Evan," I said, my voice sounding thin and foreign to my own ears. "Are you really going to let them do this? Are you not even going to speak to me?" Evan finally looked up. His eyes were empty. There was no love, no guilt, just a cold, glazed look of detachment. It is strictly business, Mara," he said, his voice devoid of inflection. He sounded like he was reading from a script. "The prenup states that any assets acquired individually, remain separate property. We are just executing the terms of the contract." He was talking about our life as if it were a failed merger. I took a step toward him, but then I froze. A scent drifted from the hallway, faint but undeniable. Vanilla and heavy musk. It was not my perfume. It was not Darla's floral spray. It was the same scent I had smelled on Evan's shirt 2 months ago when he claimed he was working late. She had been here. Today. While I was at the doctor confirming our child's existence, his mistress had been here helping them pack my boxes. The realization burned the tears right out of my eyes. Sadness evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I gripped the handle of my suitcase until my knuckles turned white. I did not scream. I did not beg. I walked to the door. opened it, and let the cold wind bite my face. Before I crossed the threshold, I turned back to look at them one last time. I'm not asking for anything. Evan, I said, my voice barely a whisper, yet it silenced the room. I'm taking back what belongs to me. I pulled the door shut before he could respond. The click of the lock felt final. The taxi was waiting at the curb. I tossed my bag into the back seat and climbed in. As the car pulled away, leaving the house behind, I pulled my phone from my pocket. My hands were trembling, not from the cold, but from the adrenaline crashing through my veins. I unlocked the screen and scrolled past the recent calls, past the friends I was too ashamed to contact, all the way down to the bottom of the list. 2 names sat there, buried in digital dust. I had sworn I would never call them. I had sworn I would make it on my own. My thumb hovered over the call button. I thought of the prenup. I thought of the baby. Driver, I said, my voice steadying. Just drive. I pressed the call button. The first ringtone echoed in the silent car, loud and terrifying. The memory of that night hit me like a physical blow as the taxi navigated the wet streets. It was only 3 weeks ago, but it felt like a lifetime had passed. We were in our small, cramped kitchen, the air thick with the smell of cheap pepperoni pizza that had gone cold in the box. It was a Friday night, the end of a long week. Evan was hunched over his phone, checking the lottery results just like he had done every Friday for 7 years. It was our silly ritual, a harmless tax on hope that we usually laughed off before turning on the television. Then the room went silent. $18.4 million, Evan whispered, the numbers rolling off his tongue like a prayer. I froze with a slice of pizza halfway to my mouth. I thought he was joking. I leaned over his shoulder, squinting at the glowing screen. The numbers matched the crumpled ticket sitting on the counter. Every single one of them. Oh my God! I gasped, the laughter bubbling up from my chest, frantic and hysterical. Evan, we won! The reality of it crashed over me, and the laughter turned into tears. I grabbed his shoulders, shaking him. We can fix the transmission on the sedan, I sobbed, burying my face in his neck. We can finally pay off your student loans. And the clinic. Evan, we can try again. We can have a baby. I reached for his hand, expecting him to crush my fingers in excitement, to pick me up and spin me around the way he did when he got his first promotion. But he didn't. Evan pulled his hand away. He did not look at me. His eyes were glued to the screen. His face washed in its pale blue light. It was the first crack in the foundation, though I was too blinded by joy to see it clearly. I need to think, he said, his voice flat. Less than 2 hours later, the warmth of the evening had vanished entirely. The doorbell rang, sharp and demanding. I opened it to find Darla and Kendra standing there, flanked by a man in a charcoal suit I recognized as a lawyer from Kendra's social circle. They did not bring champagne. They brought briefcases. Where is the ticket? Darla asked, stepping past me without removing her coat. She walked into my kitchen with the energy of a crisis manager arriving at a disaster site. It is on the counter, Evan said. He was standing by the refrigerator, his arms crossed. He still hadn't looked at me. I tried to step toward the table, confused by the sudden invasion. Darla, we just found out. We haven't even— Mara, honey. Darla cut me off, her voice sickly sweet but hard as iron. Why don't you go into the bedroom? The men need to talk strategy. This is a Sloan family matter. I blinked, the sting of her words slapping me across the face. I am his wife, I said, my voice trembling. I am family. Technically, Kendra muttered, dropping her designer bag onto the table right next to the winning ticket. She looked at the lawyer. Check the dates on the purchase. Evan mentioned a prenuptial agreement, the lawyer said, opening a file. I felt the blood drain from my face. We had signed that paper 7 years ago on a napkin at a diner, a joke suggested by his father because neither of us had a dime to our names. It was supposed to protect us from each other's student debt. Not this. Evan, I asked, turning to my husband. What are they talking about? Evan stared at the floor. The prenup states that assets acquired with separate funds remain separate property. And look at the bank statement, Kendra interrupted, pulling up a screenshot on her tablet. The ticket was purchased at the gas station using the debit card linked to Evan's direct deposit. His money. That is our joint account, I argued, my voice rising. I pay the mortgage and the groceries from my freelance account so he can keep his paycheck in there for savings. It is all our money. On paper, Kendra said with a shrug. It is Evan's money that bought the ticket. You just paid for the pizza. The room spun. They were dissecting our life, stripping away the context of our partnership until only the cold, hard numbers remained. Darla stepped closer to me, lowering her voice. Listen to me, Mara, she hissed. Don't make this ugly. Don't be the greedy wife who embarrasses us in the press. We need to handle this with dignity. Her eyes flicked down to my stomach, staring at it not with hope, but with annoyance. We have a lot to protect now. I looked at Evan one last time, begging him to be the man I married, begging him to tell his mother and sister to get out of our house. Evan, please, I whispered. Tell them. He finally looked up, and his face was a mask of resignation. We just need to do this by the book, Mara, he said quietly. Let's follow the prenup for the sake of clarity. In that moment, the pizza box on the counter seemed to mock me. I realized then that this wasn't a sudden reaction to $18 million. They didn't just want the money. They had been waiting for a reason to cut me out, and the money had just given them the knife. They had prepared for this while I was dreaming of a nursery. Jade's apartment was a sanctuary of warmth, smelling of cinnamon sticks and strong coffee, a sharp contrast to the sterile, freezing atmosphere of the house I had just been exiled from. My hands were still shaking as I dumped the contents of my hastily packed suitcase onto her living room rug. Clothes, toiletries, and random knickknacks spilled out in a chaotic heap. Jade sat on the floor beside me, handing me a steaming mug. Drink, she commanded gently. You need the caffeine if we are going to fight this. I sifted through the pile, pushing aside a sweater I did not remember packing. My fingers brushed against thick, textured paper. I froze. It was a manila envelope, wrinkled at the corners, with the word important scrawled across the front in Evan's handwriting from 7 years ago. I must have grabbed it from the filing cabinet in a blind panic when Darla started screaming at me to hurry. Jade, I whispered, my heart hammering against my ribs. I have the prenup. The original copy. Jade's eyes widened. Open it, now! I tore the seal, my breath hitching in my throat. The document was dense, filled with legal jargon that made my head spin. Separate property, commingling of assets, dissolution clauses. I felt a wave of nausea. They were right. I was going to lose everything because I was too stupid to understand the fine print. I was about to close the folder when a specific phrase in paragraph 9 caught my eye. Windfall acquisition. I squinted at the text, reading it aloud, my voice trembling. Any asset acquired through a game of chance, lottery, or windfall using marital funds shall be considered marital property regardless of the individual contribution ratio to said funds. I read it again. And a third time. Marital funds, Jade repeated, leaning in. Mara, define marital funds in the contract. I flipped back to the definitions page. Funds held in any joint checking or savings account bearing the names of both parties. Jade slammed her hand on the floor, a triumphant grin spreading across her face. They are bluffing. They are banking on you being too scared or too sad to actually read the damn thing. Evan used the debit card for the joint account to buy that ticket. It does not matter if he put the money in there. Once it touches that account, it is marital money. A spark of hope ignited in my chest, but it was quickly doused by a cold realization. I scrambled for my phone and opened our banking app. I needed to screenshot the transaction history. I needed proof that the card he used was linked to that specific account. The loading circle spun for a second, and then a red box popped up invalid credentials. Access denied. He changed the password, I said, the phone slipping from my numb fingers. He locked me out. I stared at the black screen, feeling the blood drain from my face. It was not just about the $18 million. That account held our life savings. It held the rainy day fund we had built for a house. It is worse than that. I realized, my voice hollow, Jade, for years. For years, he told me to pay the grocery bills and the electric bills from my personal freelance account. He said it was easier for him to save if we kept the joint account strictly for his direct deposits and big purchases. Jade's expression darkened. Oh, that son of a bitch! I paid for our life so he could pad that account, I said, the betrayal twisting like a knife in my gut. And now he is using that balance to claim he is the only one who contributed to the household. He set me up. He has been setting me up for years. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, vibrating violently against the wood. The screen lit up with a text message from a blocked number, but the preview showed the sender clearly. It was Darla. Sign the waiver by 5 o'clock today. If you force us to go to court, we will release the medical records regarding your mental instability. Walk away, Mara, or you will lose much more than money. I stared at the threat. A week ago, that message would have made me cry. It would have made me beg for their forgiveness. But as I looked at the hospital bracelet still on my wrist, thinking of the child they wanted to discard along with me, something inside me hardened. The tears did not come. Are you going to reply? Jade asked softly, watching my face. I picked up the phone. I did not type a response. I did not call Evan to plead for mercy. I took a screenshot of the message, saving it to a hidden folder. No, I said, looking up at Jade with dry, fierce eyes. I am done replying. I am done letting them tell me who I am. I was not the victim they thought they had crushed. I was a woman with a copy of the contract, a screenshot of their blackmail, and absolutely nothing left to lose. Finding a lawyer who was willing to go up against the Sloan family was harder than I expected. For the first 6 hours of the morning, Jade and I sat at her kitchen table making calls, only to hear the same polite refusals. It was seemingly the sudden $18 million net worth of my husband had already bought him a shield of influence. They either had a conflict of interest or simply did not want the headache. Then we found Alyssa Grant. Her office was not in the high-rise district where Evan's new legal team operated. It was a boutique firm in a renovated brick building, sharp and modern. Alyssa was 40 years old, with eyes like flint and a posture that suggested she did not know the meaning of the word retreat. She read through my copy of the prenup in silence, her pen tapping a rhythmic beat against the mahogany desk. After 10 agonizing minutes, she looked up. Most people would tell you to settle. Mara, Alyssa said, her voice cool and professional. They would say the Sloans have too much firepower, but most people do not read paragraph 9. She slid the paper back to me. You are not asking for charity here. You are not begging. You have rights. They told me I would get nothing, I said, my voice shaking slightly. They said the money belongs to Evan. They lied. Alyssa stated simply, we are going to file an immediate motion to freeze the assets. It is a strategy I call freeze and frame. We petition the court to hold the entire $18 million in an escrow account until the divorce is finalized. If they cannot spend the money, they cannot use it to bury you. I don't have the money for a retainer, I admitted, looking down at my hands. They locked my accounts. I will take the case on a limited contingency basis, Alyssa said, scribbling notes on a yellow pad. but there are filing fees, court costs. It will be $5,000 up front." Before I could answer, Jade reached into her purse and slapped a checkbook onto the desk. She wrote the check with aggressive strokes and tore it out. "Jade." "No," I started. "That is your savings for the restaurant. Consider it an investment in karma," Jade said, handing the check to Alyssa. "Just bury them." At that exact moment, my phone began to vibrate against the wood of Alyssa's desk. The screen flashed Darla Sloan. "Put it on speaker," Alyssa commanded. "Do not say a word unless I tell you to." I tapped the button. Darla's voice filled the room, shrill and vibrating with rage. "You ungrateful little leech. We offered you a clean break, and you dare to threaten us with lawyers? Do you have any idea who you are dealing with? We will ruin you. Mara, we will make sure you end up on the street with absolutely nothing." I flinched, but Alyssa did not blink. She leaned toward the phone, listening intently. When Darla finally stopped to breathe, Alyssa signaled for me to hang up. "That was perfect," Alyssa said, a small, dangerous smile touching her lips. "She just handed us a harassment claim. That is coercion. I want you to save that call log. I am sending a letter of representation to their counsel within the hour. From this moment on, they do not speak to you. They speak to me. They are going to fight the freeze order." I said, "Let them." Alyssa replied, "I am also filing for a temporary restraining order based on that threat, and we are going to subpoena everything. The bank statements, the security footage from the gas station where he bought the ticket. We will prove a pattern of marital spending." Just as we were leaving the office, Alyssa's paralegal rushed in with a tablet. "Ms. Grant, we just got a ping from the court docket," the paralegal said. "Evan Sloan filed for an emergency dissolution of marriage at 9 o'clock this morning." Alyssa took the tablet, her eyes scanning the digital document. She laughed. A short, sharp sound. "He rushed it," she said. "Look at the date of separation listed. He put yesterday's date. But your text messages prove he was sleeping in your bed 2 nights ago. He is panicking. Mara, he is trying to control the timeline, but he just committed perjury on his initial filing." I felt a surge of validation, but it was short-lived. As we stepped out onto the sidewalk, my phone chimed with an email notification. It was from Blue Haven Creative Studio, the agency that provided 80% of my freelance income. "Subject project cancellation. Effective immediately, dear Mara. Due to the emerging drama surrounding your personal situation, we feel it is best to pause our collaboration. We need to protect the studio's image. All current contracts are voided." I stared at the screen, the sidewalk swaying beneath my feet. Evan had not just filed for divorce. He had started the smear campaign. They were stripping me of my ability to fight back before the war had even officially begun. "This is not just a breakup," I whispered to Jade. "This is an execution." The bank statements Alyssa had subpoenaed lay spread across the conference table like a map of my betrayal. I stared at the name printed over and over again in the transaction column Tessa Ray. I felt the blood drain from my face as the scent of heavy vanilla musk and vanilla ghosted through my memory. It was the same smell that had lingered in my hallway the day they kicked me out. "Tessa Ray," I whispered, the syllables tasting like ash in my mouth. I know that smell." Alyssa tapped at the paper with her pen, her expression grim but focused. "In this state, adultery alone does not usually dictate how the assets are divided," Alyssa explained, her voice steady. "The court does not care if he broke your heart, but they do care if he broke the bank to do it. This is called financial misconduct. Mara, dissipation of marital assets." She pointed to a recurring transfer. $2,500 a month, Alyssa read aloud. "That looks like rent. Another $600 for a car lease. And look at the dates. This started 12 months ago. 12 months. A year of my life." I closed my eyes, and the memories rearranged themselves into a sickening new pattern. I thought of all the nights Evan had come home late, claiming he was pulling overtime to help us save for a baby. I thought of the way he had started sleeping with his phone face down on the nightstand, snapping at me if I even dusted near it. He wasn't working to build our future. He was financing his escape. And look at this, Alyssa said, circling a transaction at the bottom of the page. $50,000, transferred the morning after the lottery win. He had given her a $50,000 bonus before he even told his wife we had won. Wait, Jade said. She had been scrolling on her tablet, investigating the name. She turned the screen toward us. Oh my God! Look at her work history. I leaned in. Tessa Ray's LinkedIn profile smiled back at me young, blonde, and polished. But it was the job title under her name that made the room spin. Junior Account Executive at KS, Public Relations. KS? I stammered. That is Kendra Sloan. His sister's agency. She isn't just a random woman he met at a bar, Jade said, her voice rising in disbelief. She was on Kendra's payroll. They knew. Mara. They introduced them. The realization hit me harder than the eviction. This was not just a cheating husband. This was a family conspiracy. They had planted her, or at least cultivated her, waiting for the right moment to swap me out for a model that fit their new tax bracket better. Before I could process the horror of it, my phone buzzed with a notification from a local community forum. My heart hammered as I opened the app. An anonymous user had posted a thread titled, "Local Lottery Drama, The Truth." Everyone thinks the wife is a victim, but word on the street is she baby-trapped him after finding out he won. She is just digging for gold. Don't believe the tears. They are controlling the narrative, Alyssa said, reading over my shoulder. They are poisoning the jury pool before we even get to court. It gets worse, I said, my voice trembling. I got a call from a friend at Blue Haven. She said a private investigator was there this morning asking questions about my past, asking if I had a history of mental instability or theft. They are looking for dirt, Alyssa said, her eyes narrowing. And if they cannot find any, they will manufacture it, as if on cue. Alyssa's office line rang. She answered, listened for a moment, and then her face turned into a mask of cold fury. Absolutely not, Alyssa said into the receiver. My client is sitting right here. We will not be coming down to the station, but we will be sending over digital evidence immediately. She hung up and looked at me. That was the police, she said. Evan filed a report. He is claiming you stole valuable family property when you left the house. He wants you charged with theft. I took nothing, I cried, standing up. I took my clothes and my laptop. Darla watched me pack every single box I know, Alyssa said, already typing on her keyboard. And we are going to prove it. Thank God for that taxi driver. She pulled up the file we had secured days ago, the interior dashcam footage from the taxi that took me away. It showed me climbing into the back seat, sobbing, with exactly one suitcase and a tote bag. We are sending this to the detective, Alyssa said, along with the inventory list the movers signed. This is a false police report. Mara, it is a crime. I sank back into the chair, clutching my stomach. This was not a legal battle anymore. It was a hunt. They did not just want to keep the money. They wanted to erase me. They wanted to paint me as a thief, a liar, and a gold digger so that when they finally discarded me, no one would care. I am not going to break, I said, though my voice shook. If they want a war, I am going to give them one. The hardest thing Alyssa ever asked me to do was absolutely nothing. Every time I opened my phone, I saw the comments. Strangers were dissecting my life, calling me a gold digger, a trap, a woman who got pregnant for a paycheck. My thumb hovered over the reply button a dozen times a day, desperate to scream the truth. But Alyssa's voice was always in my head. Do not engage, Alyssa had warned me, her eyes hard over the rim of her glasses. Silence is strategic. Mara, if you argue in the comments, You look defensive. If you stay silent, you look like a victim who is taking the high road. Let the lawyers do the talking with documents. So I swallowed the rage. I focused on surviving. I went to my prenatal appointments alone, sitting in the waiting room surrounded by happy couples holding hands. When the doctor played the heartbeat, a strong, steady rhythm of 140 beats per minute, I recorded it on my phone just to remind myself why I was fighting. I picked up small graphic design gigs under a pseudonym, working late into the night at Jade's kitchen table until my eyes burned, just to feel like I had some control over my own existence. It was during one of these late nights that Jade made a noise that sounded like a strangled gasp. "Mara," Jade said, turning her laptop toward me. "Look at this." On the screen was a press release for Evan's new venture, something called the Sloan Foundation. At the top of the page was a sleek, stylized logo of a tree with interlocking roots. "I designed that," I said, blinking. "I drew that on my iPad 3 years ago for his family reunion t-shirts. I have the original vector files." "Exactly," Jade said, tapping the screen aggressively. "You did this as a freelance artist. Did he ever pay you for it?" "No," I said. "It was a favor. A favor for personal use," Jade corrected. "He is using it now for a commercial enterprise. He is branding his new millionaire lifestyle with your work. We took it to Alyssa the next morning. For the first time in days, I saw her smile. It was not a nice smile. It was a shark's smile. "This is intellectual property infringement," Alyssa said, leaning back in her chair. "This gives us a lever outside of family court. We can sue the foundation and Kendra's PR firm directly for copyright violation. If they do not want a federal lawsuit on top of the divorce, they need to stop the smear campaign immediately." "Do it," I said. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I did not save, but I knew who it was immediately. "Tessa, I just wanted to say I am sorry for how this happened." "I never wanted you to be homeless. I told Evan he should have let you stay until you found a place. I felt terrible when I saw your coat on the rack the night before you left." I stared at the screen, my breath catching in my throat. The night before I left, I had been at my mother's house helping her fix her router that night. The house was supposed to be empty. "Alyssa," I shouted, holding up the phone. Alyssa read the text and immediately handed the phone to her paralegal. She just admitted she was in the marital home overnight while the wife was away. That destroys their timeline of a post-separation relationship. File for a preservation order on all their devices. Now, before they realize what she just did and try to delete it, she is trying to play the victim to me," I said, shaking my head in disbelief. "She stole my husband, and now she wants me to comfort her guilt." "She is sloppy," Alyssa said, "and sloppy people lose." 2 hours later, an email arrived from Evan's lawyer. It was a settlement offer. They were offering $100,000 in exchange for a full non-disclosure agreement and an immediate withdrawal of all my claims. $100,000, Jade scoffed, looking over my shoulder. "That is less than 1% of what he won." "It is an insult. It is fear," Alyssa corrected, tossing the paper onto her desk. "They are scared of discovery. They know we have the text message. They know we have the copyright claim. They want to buy your silence cheap before we find the bodies buried in their financial records." Alyssa looked at me, her pen hovering over her notepad. "We can counter," she said. "Or we can reject it and push for full discovery. If we push, they will come for you harder. It will get ugly." I looked at the hospital bracelet I still kept in my pocket. I thought about Darla's voice ordering me out of my own home. I thought about Evan standing there, letting it happen. They wanted to buy me off like a nuisance. They wanted me to sign a paper saying I never existed in their world. "Reject it," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I don't want their hush money. I want them to answer for what they did. If they want a fight, well, I am ready to burn the whole thing down to get to the truth." The depositions took place in a windowless conference room that smelled of stale coffee and expensive cologne. It was a sterile battlefield where words were weapons. And Alyssa Grant was a sharpshooter who never missed. Darla was the first to sit in the hot seat. She adjusted her silk scarf, looking at me with a mixture of pity and disgust, playing the role of the protective matriarch to perfection. "Mara is an opportunist," Darla stated, her voice trembling with feigned emotion. She saw the winning numbers, and suddenly, she was pregnant. "She is just trying to cash in on my son's success." Alyssa didn't look up from her notepad. "Mrs. Sloane, who drafted the prenuptial agreement 7 years ago, our family attorney," Darla replied haughtily. "And are you aware," Alyssa said, sliding the document across the table, "that the agreement explicitly states that the origin of the funds in a joint account is irrelevant to the status of the purchase? Your own lawyer wrote that to protect Evan from Mara's debt. Now, it protects Mara's claim to the ticket. You built the trap yourself." Darla's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at the paper as if it were a venomous snake. Next came Kendra. She sat with her arms crossed, exuding boredom. "I do not know Tessa Ray well." Kendra lied, examining her manicured nails. "She is just someone in my professional network. I had no idea she and Evan were involved." Alyssa smiled, a cold, predatory expression. She placed a glossy photograph on the table. It was from a company retreat 2 years ago. Kendra and Tessa were hugging, holding champagne flutes. "This is an email from your work server," Alyssa read aloud. Subject line, "The Evan Project?" You introduced them. Kendra. "You curated his affair like a PR campaign." "Do you want to revise your statement before we look at the perjury laws?" Kendra turned pale, her eyes darting toward her lawyer, but he could do nothing. Tessa was harder to break. She cried, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, insisting that Evan had told her our marriage was over long ago. "He said they were separated." Tessa sobbed. "He said they were just roommates." "Roommates who shared a bed," Alyssa asked, sliding a bank statement forward. "Here is a transaction from the joint account. Groceries, paid by Evan, 2 days before the lottery win. And here is the electric bill for the marital home. If he was separated, why was he paying to keep the lights on for his wife? But the emotional blow came from a witness we didn't expect to need. Mr. Henderson, the owner of the gas station in Lake Briar, where we bought the ticket every Friday." He sat awkwardly in his flannel shirt, looking out of place among the suits. "I know them both," Mr. Henderson said, looking at Evan with disappointment. "Every Friday for 6 years, they would come in, buy a diet soda and a ticket. They always joked it was for the baby fund. They were a team. Evan refused to meet Mr. Henderson's eyes. When it was finally Evan's turn, the room felt heavy, the air thick with tension. He looked tired. The arrogance he had worn at the house was gone, replaced by a defensive crouch. "I put 80% of the money into that account," Evan argued, his voice rising. "It was my salary. Therefore, the ticket was bought with my money." Paragraph 4. Alyssa cut in sharp and fast. "Contribution ratio does not alter the marital nature of the asset." Try again. "Evan." She pulled up a digital log. "You changed the password to the online banking at 9 o'clock the morning after the win." "Why, for security," Evan muttered. "If it was for security," Alyssa asked, leaning in, "why didn't you give the new password to your wife?" The joint account holder, Evan, stayed silent. The silence stretched, agonizing and loud. I didn't think she needed it," he finally whispered. "We have a group chat log here," Alyssa said, dropping the final bomb. "Between you, Darla, and Kendra, time-stamped 2 hours after the draw. Darla wrote kick her out before she reads Section 9. You knew. Evan, you knew the prenup gave her half, so you tried to force her to sign a waiver before she could read it. That is fraud." Evan flinched as if he had been slapped. I watched him, expecting to feel triumph, but I only felt a hollow ache. He had sold me out for approval from his mother. Alyssa closed her folder and looked Evan dead in the eye. "One last question. Mr. Sloane." For 7 years, every Friday night when you walked out of that gas station with that piece of paper. Whose ticket did you call it? Evan looked at his lawyer. He looked at his mother. Then, for a fleeting second, he looked at me. I called it. Ours. He said. His voice barely a ghost of a sound. That one word hung in the air. A crack in his defense that no amount of money could ever fix. He had just admitted the truth on the record. And I knew, right then, that I had him. The legal skirmishes before the main trial felt less like justice and more like a series of dirty street fights. Evan's legal team filed a motion to suppress the group chat logs, arguing that private family communications were protected under privacy laws. They were desperate to bury the evidence of their conspiracy. But Judge Rowan, a stern man with no patience for games, denied the motion in less than 10 minutes. "Counsel," Judge Rowan had said, peering over his spectacles at Evan's high-priced attorney, "do not use privacy rights to shield potential fraud. The motion is denied. It was a small victory, but it did not feel like one. It felt like I was holding back a tsunami with a teaspoon. I had moved out of Jade's apartment to give her some space, settling into a studio apartment on the edge of town that cost $900 a month. It was all I could afford. The place smelled of damp carpet and old frying oil, and the heater rattled like a dying engine. Between the morning sickness that lasted all day and the paranoia that followed me home, I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. I was working 3 freelance jobs just to pay for the vitamins and the rent, while my husband sat in our house planning how to spend $18 million. Jade came over one evening to help me unpack. She watched me struggle to lift a box of books, her face twisting in frustration. Finally, she snapped, "This is ridiculous, Mara." Jade slammed a plate onto the counter, the sound making me jump. "You are living like a fugitive. You are pregnant. Why are you letting them do this to you when you have an army you refuse to use?" I froze, clutching a stack of paperbacks against my chest. "Jade, stop," I warned, my voice low. "No, I will not stop," Jade yelled, throwing her hands up. "You have 2 brothers, Mara. 2 brothers who could end this nightmare in a single phone call. Why won't you just call them?" The silence that followed was deafening. The names hung in the air, unspoken but heavy. Caleb and Graham. To the rest of the world, they were the Collins brothers. Titans of industry with a net worth that made Evan's lottery win look like pocket change. To me, they were the overprotective shadows I had run away from 10 years ago. I left that life, I said, setting the books down with trembling hands. I wanted to be Mara. Just Mara. Not a Collins, not a heiress. I wanted to build something that was mine. "Well, look around you, Mara," Jade said, her voice softening as she gestured to the peeling paint on the walls. "You built this. You married a man because you wanted to be loved for yourself, not your family money. And look what he did. He threw you away the second he got a taste of wealth. Is your pride really worth this?" I sat down on the edge of the sagging mattress, feeling the tears prick my eyes. I can't call them. I hid them from Evan for 7 years. If I call them now, it proves Darla is right. It proves I am just a fraud who needs a bailout. I wanted to stand on my own 2 feet. When I told Alyssa about my family later that week, she didn't look surprised. She didn't look impressed. She just looked practical. "Mara." "Look at me," Alyssa said, leaning across her desk. "Do you want to win a moral victory in a bankruptcy court? Or do you want to survive the dirty war they are starting because the law takes time and they are running out of patience?" She was right. The escalation began 2 days later. Evan started whispering to our mutual friends that the baby wasn't his. He told anyone who would listen that the timeline didn't add up and that he was going to demand a paternity test and full custody just to spite me. He was weaponizing my unborn child to break my spirit. It was a low blow, even for him. But the breaking point arrived in a plain white envelope slid under my apartment door. I found it when I came home from the grocery store. There was no stamp, no return address. Inside was a single, grainy photograph. It showed me walking into the obstetrics clinic last Tuesday, my hand resting on my stomach. My blood ran cold. They had hired a private investigator to follow me. They knew where I lived. They knew my doctor. I was not safe. That night, the fear was a physical weight on my chest. I sat on the floor with my phone in my hand, the screen casting a pale blue light on my face. I opened my contacts list and scrolled all the way to the bottom, past the friends I had lost, past the colleagues who had abandoned me. Caleb, Graham. The names stared back at me. I could picture them. Caleb with his terrifying calm. Graham with his fierce loyalty. They would burn the world down for me if I asked. All I had to do was press the button. My thumb hovered over the glass. I took a shaky breath, my heart hammering against my ribs. I wanted to hear a voice that would tell me I was safe. I wanted to stop being the victim. But the shame was a heavy anchor. I couldn't do it. Not yet. I can do this. I whispered to the empty room, trying to believe it. I locked the screen, leaving the call unmade. But for the first time in years, the door to my past was unlocked, and the wind was starting to blow it open. The rain beat against the thin window pane of my studio apartment, sounding like knuckles rapping on glass. It was the night before the trial, and the air felt heavy with impending doom. Around 8 o'clock, a bike courier arrived, dripping wet, and handed me a thick envelope sealed with wax. He did not ask for a signature. He just said it was from the Sloan family. I opened it at the kitchen counter. It was a settlement offer, drafted on heavy cream-colored paper. They were offering me $25,000. In exchange, I had to sign a non-disclosure agreement that would silence me for life, withdraw my lawsuit, and grant Evan primary custody rights upon the birth of the child in exchange for them allowing me to live without harassment. It was not an offer. It was an ultimatum. My phone buzzed. It was Evan. It was the first time he had texted me directly in weeks. I will do whatever it takes to get control of this situation. Mara. The message read. Then, a second bubble appeared. I am sorry it has to be this way. Just sign the paper so we can stop fighting. I dropped the phone on the counter as if it were burning hot. I sank to the floor, pulling my knees to my chest. I was 34 weeks pregnant, exhausted, and terrified. I was not fighting for the money anymore. I was fighting for the right to be a mother, and I felt my strength slipping away like sand through a sieve. I should sign it, I whispered to the empty room. I should just take the money and run. Alyssa was on speakerphone 5 minutes later, her voice sharp enough to cut through my panic. If you sign that, Mara, you admit guilt, Alyssa warned. You admit you are unstable. They will use that document to take your baby the second it is born, and then they will sue you for legal fees. Surrender does not buy you peace. It buys them a victory lap. I knew she was right, but my hands would not stop shaking. Then the door opened. Jade walked in, her face pale. She was holding a plain white envelope. I did not open it, Jade said, her voice barely audible. A private driver just dropped it off. No postage, no company stamp. It just says, for Mara from C. I stared at the letter C. My heart hammered against my ribs, a painful, frantic rhythm. I took the envelope. Inside, there was a single first-class plane ticket to Lake Briar dated for tonight, implying they knew exactly where the trial was being held, and a sleek black business card with nothing on it but a phone number. Alyssa went silent on the line. Then she let out a long breath. They found you, Alyssa said softly. I picked up my phone. My fingers trembled as I dialed the number. It rang twice. You are alive, a deep baritone voice said on the other end. It was calm, steady, and utterly familiar. Good. Tell me where you are. Caleb, I choked out, the tears finally spilling over. I am so sorry. Save the apology, Caleb said. Just give me the address. We are already in the city. The next morning, the courthouse steps were crowded with reporters. Darla had tipped them off, hoping to humiliate me one last time. Evan stood near the entrance in his custom suit, looking confident, flanked by his legal team and a smug-looking Kendra. I walked up the concrete stairs with Jade and Alyssa, keeping my head down, bracing myself for the flashbulbs. Then the atmosphere shifted. 2 black SUVs pulled up to the curb, moving with a silent, predatory grace that made the news vans look cheap. The doors opened. Caleb and Graham stepped out. They were not wearing flashy logos or gold watches. They wore navy suits that cost more than Evan's entire wardrobe, tailored to perfection. They did not look at the cameras. They did not look at Evan. They looked at me. Graham, older now, with silver at his temples, walked straight to my left side. Caleb took my right. They created a physical wall between me and the world. "Who are they?" I heard Evan whisper to his lawyer, his voice laced with sudden confusion. Caleb turned his head slightly, his eyes sweeping over Evan with the indifference of a lion looking at a mouse. He did not say a word. He didn't have to. "We are her brothers," Graham said to the nearest bailiff, his voice carrying effortlessly over the crowd. "And we are joining the legal team as counsel." They did not come with checkbooks waving. They did not come to buy the judge. They stood there, tall and immovable, radiating a kind of power that Evan's lottery millions could never replicate. For the first time in 7 years, I was not the poor wife. I was not the charity case. I was a Collins. And I was finally safe. "Let's go inside," Caleb said, placing a hand gently on my shoulder. "We have a lot of work to do." The courtroom air was stale and recycled, but to me it smelled like impending victory. Evan's lawyer spent the first hour reciting a script that painted me as a manipulative villain. He used words like predatory and calculated, claiming I had trapped Evan with a pregnancy the moment I saw the winning numbers. But his voice lacked conviction. It echoed hollowly against the stack of documents sitting on the plaintiff's table. When it was Alyssa's turn, she did not use adjectives. She used dates. She laid out the timeline with surgical precision. The receipt from the gas station proved the ticket was purchased during the marriage. The bank statements proved the funds came from our joint account. Then came the prenuptial agreement. Judge Rowan adjusted his glasses, reading the text that Darla had been so desperate to hide. "Mrs. Sloane," Judge Rowan said, looking over the bench at my mother-in-law, "this document explicitly states that the ratio of financial contribution does not alter the nature of the funds in a joint account. You cannot claim the money is his simply because he deposited the check, not when your own contract says otherwise." Darla sat frozen, her face draining of color as the legal trap she had built for me snapped shut around her own son. Then came the question that broke Evan. Alyssa projected the log of the password change onto the screen. "Mr. Sloane," Alyssa asked, her voice dangerously calm. "You claimed you changed the banking password for security purposes immediately after the win. If it was for security against hackers, why did you not share the new password with your wife? Who is a joint owner of the account?" Evan shifted in his seat, tugging at his collar. He looked at his lawyer, then at his mother, but they could not help him. I didn't think she needed access right away," Evan stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "Because you were already planning to divorce her," Alyssa countered. "And we have the group chat to prove it." She revealed the text from Darla kick her out before she reads Section 9. The courtroom murmured. Evan slumped in his chair. The image of the confident millionaire dissolving into a scared child caught in a lie. Tessa fared no better. Under oath, she was forced to admit that the thousands of dollars transferred to her account were for rent and car payments, proving she was being supported by marital assets while Evan was still living with me. The narrative of a separated life collapsed under the weight of receipts. Then came the final nail. Caleb and Graham did not make a scene. They simply had their financial forensic team submit a single, comprehensive analysis. It showed that while Evan's salary was higher, I had paid for 60% of the daily household expenses, groceries, utilities, repairs from my personal freelance account, allowing Evan to hoard cash in the joint account. I was not a leech. I was the one who had kept the lights on. And finally, Your Honor, Alyssa said, playing her ace. We submit evidence regarding the police report filed by Mr. Sloan alleging theft. She presented the dash cam footage and the mover's inventory list, proving I had left with only my personal effects. This report was filed falsely to intimidate the plaintiff, Alyssa stated. Judge Rowan looked at Evan with undisguised disdain. The court finds the defendant's actions to be in bad faith. The lottery winnings are deemed marital property under the existing prenuptial agreement. Furthermore, due to the dissipation of assets on an extramarital affair and the fraudulent attempt to hide funds, the court awards 60% of the total winnings to Mrs. Collins. Mr. Sloan is also ordered to pay all legal fees and is subject to a permanent restraining order. The gavel came down with a sound like a gunshot. It was over. Evan sat there, stunned, staring at the table as if he could not understand how $18 million had just slipped through his fingers. I stood up. I did not feel the urge to cheer. I just felt light. I walked past the defense table. Evan looked up, his eyes red and pleading, perhaps realizing for the first time that he had lost not just the money, but the only person who had loved him when he was poor. Mara, he whispered. I stopped. I looked him in the eye, my hand resting protectively on my stomach. You kicked me out of my house, Evan, I said quietly, but you couldn't kick out the truth. I turned my back on him and walked toward the heavy oak doors. Jade was there, grinning through tears. Caleb and Graham were waiting just outside the bar, their presence a solid wall of safety. I took Jade's hand, and together we walked out of the courtroom and into the bright, blinding sunlight. Graham opened the car door for me, his expression softening. It is done, he said. Where do you want to go first? I took a deep breath of the fresh air, tasting freedom for the first time in months. Home, I said. I want to go home. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please let me know in the comments where you are tuning in from. I would love to hear your thoughts on how this ended. Don't forget to subscribe to Victoria Revenge Stories, like the video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people.